The Christian Complete Armor by William Gurnall. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, chapter 9. Of pride of gifts and how Satan tempts the Christian thereto. The second spiritual wickedness which Satan provokes unto, especially the saint, is spiritual pride. This was the sin which made him of a blessed angel a cursed devil. And as it was his personal sin, so he chiefly labors to derive it to the sons of men. And he so far prevailed on our first parents that ever since this sin has and claims a kind of regency in the heart, making use both of the bad and good to draw her chariot. First of evil, pride enters into the labors of other sins. They do but work to make her brave as subjects to uphold the state and grandeur of their prince. Thus you shall see some drudge and toil, cheat, oppress, and what mean they? Oh, it is to get in a state to maintain their pride. Others fawn and flatter, lie, dissemble, and for what? To help pride up some mount of honor? Again, it maketh use of that which is good. It can work with God's own tools, his ordinances, by which the Holy Spirit advances his kingdom of grace in the hearts of his saints. These often are prostituted to pride. A man may be very zealous in prayer and painstaking in preaching, and all the while pride is the master whom he serves, though in God's livery. It can take sanctuary in the holiest actions and hide itself under the skirt of virtue itself. Thus, while a man is exercising his charity, pride may be the idol in secret for which he lavished out his gold so freely. It is hard starving this sin. There is nothing almost but it can live on. Nothing so base that a proud heart will not be lifted up with, and nothing so sacred that it will profane. Even dare to drink in the bowls of the sanctuary. Nay, rather than starve, it will feed on the carcasses of other sins. This minion pride will stir up the soul to resist, yea, in a manner kill some sins, that she may boastingly show the head of them, and blow the creature up with the conceit of himself above others, as the Pharisee, who through pride boasted that he was not as the publican, so that pride, if not looked to, will have to do everywhere and have a large fear it moves in. Nothing indeed without divine assistance the creature hath or doth, but will soon become a prey to this devourer. But I am not to handle it in its latitude. Pride is either conversant about carnal objects, as pride of beauty, strength, riches, and such like, or about spiritual. The latter we shall speak a little to. I confess for the former, possibly a saint, may be caught in them, no sin to be slighted, yet not so commonly, for ordinarily pride is of those perfections which are suitable, if not proper to the state and calling we are in. Thus the musician is proud of the skill he hath in his art, by which he excels others of his rank. The scholar, though he can play perhaps as well, yet is not proud of that, but looks on it as beneath him. No, he is proud of his learning and choice notions, and so of others. Now, the life of a Christian, as a Christian, is superior to the life of man as a man, and therefore does not value himself as these which are beneath him, but in higher and more raised perfections which suit a Christian's calling. As a natural man is proud of perfections suitable to his natural estate, as honor, beauty, so the Christian is prone chiefly to be puffed up with perfections suitable to his life. I shall name three: pride of gifts, pride of grace, pride of privileges. These are the things which Satan chiefly labors to entangle him in. Section 1. First, pride of gifts. By gifts I mean those supernatural abilities with which the Spirit of God doth enrich and endow the minds of men for edification of the body of Christ, of which gifts the Apostle tells us there is great diversity, and all from the same Spirit. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 4. There is not greater variety of colors and qualities in plants and flowers, with which the earth like a carpet of needlework is variegated for the delight and service of man, than there is of gifts in the minds of men, natural and spiritual, to render them useful to one another, born in civil societies and Christian fellowship. The Christian, as well as man, is intended to be a sociable creature. And for the better managing of this spiritual commonwealth among Christians, God doth wisely and graciously provide and impart gifts suitable to the place every one stands to his brethren, as the vessels are larger or less in the body natural according to their place therein. Now, Satan labors what he can to taint these gifts and fly-blow them with pride in the Christian, that so he may spoil the Christian's trade and commerce, which is mutually maintained by the gifts and graces of one another. Pride of gifts hinders the Christian's trade, at least his thriving by their commerce, two ways. First, pride of gifts is the cause why we do so little good with them to others. Secondly, why we receive so little good from the gifts of others. First, pride of gifts hinders the doing of good by them to others, and that upon a threefold account. First, pride diverts a man from aiming at that end. So far as pride prevails, the man prays, preaches, etc., rather to be thought good by others, rather to enthrone himself than Christ in the opinion and hearts of his hearers. Pride carries the man aloof to be admired for the height of his parts and notions, and will not suffer him to stoop so low as to speak a plain truth, or if he does, not plainly. He must have some fine lace, though on a plain stuff. Such a one may tickle the ear, but very unlikely to do real good to souls. Alas, it is not that he intends. Secondly, if this painted Jezebel of pride be perceived to look out at the window, and any exercise, whether of preaching, prayer, or conference, it doth beget a disdain in the spirits of those that hear such a one, both good and bad. It is a sin very odious to a gracious heart, and often makes the stomach go against the food, though good, through their abhorrency of that pride they see in the instrument. It is indeed their weakness, but woe to them that by their pride lead them into temptation. Nay, those that are bad, and may be in the same kind, like not that in another which they favor in themselves, and so prejudiced return as bad as they went. Thirdly, pride of gifts rob us of God's blessing in the use of them. The humble man may have Satan at his right hand to oppose him, but be sure the proud man shall find God himself there to resist him, whenever he goes about his duty. God proclaims so much, and would have the proud man know whenever he meets him, he will oppose him. He resists the proud. Great gifts are beautiful as Rachel, but pride makes them as barren like her. Either we must lay self aside, or God will lay us aside. Secondly, pride of gifts hinders the receiving of good from others. Pride fills the soul, and a full soul will take nothing from God, much less from man, to do it good. Such a one is very dainty. It is not every sermon, though wholesome food, nor every prayer, though savory, will go down. He must have a choice dish. He thinks he hath better than this of his own, and is such a one like to get good. And truly we may see it, that as the plain plowman that can eat of any homely food, if wholesome, hath more health, and is able to do more work in a day than many enjoy or can do in their whole life, that are nice, squeamish, and courtly in their face, so the humble Christian that can feed on plain truths and ordinances, which have not so much of the art of man to commence them to their palate, enjoy more of God than the nicer sort of professors, who are all to be served in a lordly dish of rare gifts. The church of Corinth was famous for gifts above other churches. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. But not in grace, none so charged for weakness in that. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 2. He calls them carnal babes in Christ, so weak as not able to digest man's meat. I have fed you, said Paul, with milk and not with meat, for hitherto ye were not able to bear it, neither ye are yet now able. Why? What is the matter? The reason lies in verse 3, ye are carnal. There is among you envy and strife. Verse 4, one saith, I am of Paul, another I am of Apollos. Pride makes them take part and make sides. One for this preacher, another for that, as they fancied one to excel another. And this is not the way to thrive. Pride destroys love, and love wanting edification is lost. The devil hath made foul work in the church by this engine. Fancy tells of one in Geneva, who being desired to go to hear virtuous that preached at the same time with Calvin, answered his friend, if Paul were to preach, I would leave Paul himself to hear Calvin. And will pride in the gifts of another so far transport even to the borders of blasphemy? What work, then, will pride make when the gifts are a man's own? Section 2, Use 1. Does Satan thus stir up saints to this spiritual pride of gifts? First, here is a word to you that have mean gifts, yet truth of grace. Be content with thy condition. Perhaps when thou hearest others, how and largely they pray, how able to discourse of the truths of God, and the like, thou art ready to go into a corner, and mourn to think how weak thy memory, how dull thy apprehensions, how straitened thy spirit, hardly able, though in secret, to utter and express thy mind to God in prayer. O thou art ready to think those the happy men and women, and almost murmur at that condition. Well, thou canst thou not say, though I have not words, I hope I have faith. I cannot dispute for the truth, but I am willing to suffer for it. I cannot remember a sermon, but I never heard a word, but I hate sin and love Christ more than ever. Lord, thou knowest I love thee. Truly, Christian, thou hast the better part. Thou little thinkest what a mercy may be wrapped up even in the meanest of thy gifts, or what temptations their gifts expose them to, which God, for aught I know, may in mercy deny thee. Joseph's coat made him finer than his brethren, but this caused all his trouble. This set the archers shooting their arrows into his sides. Thus great gifts lift a saint up a little higher in the eyes of men, but it occasions many temptations which thou meetest not with that art kept low. What with envy from their burden, malice from Satan, and pride in their own hearts, I dare say none find so hard a work to go to heaven as such. Much ado to bear up against those waves and winds, while thou creepest along the shore under the wind to heaven. It is with such as with some great lord of little estate. A meaner man oft hath money in his purse, when he hath none, and can lend his lordship some at a time of need. Great gifts and parts are titles of honor among men, but many such may come and borrow grace and comfort of a mean-gifted brother, possibly the preacher of his poor neighbor. O poor Christian, do not murmur or envy them, but rather pity and pray for them. They need it more than others. His gifts are thine. Thy grace is for thyself. Thou art like a merchant that hath his factor go to sea, but he hath his adventure without hazard brought home. Thou joinest with him in prayer, hast the help of his gifts, but not the temptation of his pride. Use 2. Secondly, does Satan labor thus to draw to pride of gifts? This speaks a word to thee, to whom God hath given more gifts than ordinary. Beware pride, that is now thy snare. Satan is at work. If possible, he will turn thy artillery against thyself. Thy safety lies in thy humility. If this lock be cut, the legions of hell are on thee. Remember whom thou wrestlest with, spiritual wickedness, and their play is to lift up, that they may give thee sorer fall. Now the more to stir up thy heart against it, I shall add some soul-humbling considerations. First, consider these spiritual gifts are not thy own, and wilt thou be proud of another's bounty? Is not God the founder, and can he not soon be the confounder of thy gifts? Thou art pride of thy gourd. What wilt thou be when it is gone? Surely then thou wilt be peevish and angry, and truly thou takest the course to be stripped of them. Gifts come on other terms than grace. God gives grace as a freehold. It hath the promise of this and another world. But gifts come on liking. Though a father will not cast off his child, yet he may take away his fine coat and ornaments if proud of them. Secondly, gifts are not merely for themselves. As the light of the sun is ministerial, it shines not for itself. So all thy gifts are for others, gifts for the edifying of the body. Suppose a man should leave a chest of money in your hands to be distributed to others. What folly is it in this man to put this into his own inventory, and applaud himself that he has so much money? Poor soul, thou art but God's executor, and by that time thou hast paid all the legacies, thou wilt see little left for thee to brag and boast of. Thirdly, no, Christian, thou shalt be accountable for these talents. Now, with what face can a proud soul look on God? Suppose one left an executor to pay legacies, and this man should pay them, not as legacies of another, but gifts of his own. Christ at his ascension gave gifts, that his children should receive. Thou hast some in thy hand. Now a proud soul gives out all, not as the legacy of Christ, but as his own. He assumes all to himself. Oh, how abominable is this, to entitle ourselves to God's honors. Fourthly, thy gifts commend thee not to God. Man may be taken with thy expression and notion in prayer, but these are all paired off when thy prayer comes before God. O woman, saith Christ, great is thy faith, not polite and flourishing thy language. It were great good after our duties to sort the ingredients of which they are made up, what grace contributed, and what gifts, and what pride. And when all the heterogeneous stuff is severed, you shall see in what a little compass the actings of grace and our duties will lie. Fifthly, consider, whilst thou art priding in thy gifts, thou art dwindling and withering in thy grace. Such are like corn that runs up much into straw, whose ear commonly is but light and thin. Grace is too much neglected. Where gifts are too highly prized, we are commanded to be clothed with humility. Our garments cover the shame of our bodies, humility, the beauty of the soul. And as a tender body cannot live without cloths, so neither can grace without this clothing of humility. It kills the spirit of praise when thou shouldest bless God. Thou art applauding thyself. It destroys Christian love and stabs our fellowship with the saints to the heart. A proud man hath not room enough to walk in company because of the gifts of others he thinks stands in his way. Pride so distempers the palate that it can relish nothing that is drawn from another's vessel. Sixthly, it is the forerunner of some great sin or some great affliction. God will not suffer such a weed as pride to grow in his garden without taking some course or other to root it up. It may be he will let thee fall into some great sin, and that shall bring thee home with shame. God useth sometimes a thorn in the flesh to prick the bladder of pride in this spirit, or at least some great affliction, the very end whereof is to hide pride from man. Job chapter 33, verse 17 and 18. As you do with your hot metallic horses. Ride them over plowed lands to tame them, and then you can sit safely on their backs. If God's honor be in danger through thy pride, then expect a rod, and most likely the affliction shall be in that which will be most grievous to thee, in the thing thou art proud of. Hezekiah boasted of his treasures. God sent the Chaldeans to plunder him. Jonah was fond of his gourd, and that is smitten. And if thy spirit be blown up with the pride of gifts, thou art in danger of having them blasted, at least in the opinion of others, whose breath of applause possibly was a means to overset thy unbalanced spirit. Section 3. Question. But how would you direct us against this? Answer. Arguments you have had before. I shall only therefore point to 2 or 3 doors, where your enemy comes forth upon you, and surely the very sight thereof, if thou art loyal to Christ, will stir thee up to fall upon it. First, pride discovers itself in dwelling upon the thoughts of our gifts with a secret kind of content to see our own face, till at last we fall in love with it. We read of some whose eyes are full of the adulterous and cannot cease from sin. A proud heart is full of himself. His own abilities cast their shadow before him. They are in his eye wherever he goes. The great subject and theme of his thought is what he is and what he hath above others, applauding himself, as Bernard confesses that when one would think he has little leisure for such thoughts, even in preaching pride would be whispering in his ear. Oh, well done, Bernard. Now have a care, Christian, of chatting with such company. Run from such thoughts as from a bear. If the devil can get thee to stand on this pinnacle, while he presents thee with the glory of his spiritual attainments and endowments for thee to glaze on, thy weak head will soon turn round in pride, and therefore labor to keep the sense of thy own infirmities lively in thy soul, to divert the temptation, as those who are subject to some kind of fits carry about them things proper for the disease, that when the fit is coming, which oft is occasioned with a sweet perfume, they may use them for their help. Sweet senses are not more dangerous for them than anything they may applaud thee to thy soul. Have a care, therefore, not only of wearing such thoughts in thy own bosom, but also of sitting by others that bring the sweet sense of thy perfections to thee by their flattery. Secondly, this kind of pride appears in a forwardness to oppose itself to view. David's brethren were mistaken in him indeed. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 18. But oft the pride and naughtiness of the heart breaks out at this door. Christ's carnal friends bid Christ show himself. Pride loves to climb up, not as Zacharias to see Christ, but to be seen himself. The fool, Solomon tells us, hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover it. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 2. Pride would be somebody, and therefore comes abroad to court the multitude, whereas humility delights in privacy, as the leaves do cover and shade the fruits, that some hand may gently lift them up before they can see the fruit. So should humility and a holy modesty conceal the perfections of the soul till a hand of providence by some call invites them out. There is a pride in naked gifts as well as in naked beasts and backs. Humility is a necessary veil in all other graces, and therefore, first, Christian, look whenever thou comest forth to public duty, that thou hast a call. It is obediency to be known to answer when God calls thee forth, but it is pride to run before God speaks. Secondly, when called, earnestly implore divine strength against thy enemy. Shun not a duty for fear of pride. Thou mayest show it in the very seeming to escape it, but go in the strength of God against it. There is more hope of overcoming it by obediency than disobediency. Thirdly, and envying the gifts of others when they seem to blind your own, that they are not so fair a prospect as we desire. This is a woad which may grow too rank in a good soil. Aaron and Miriam could not bear Moses' honor. Numbers chapter 12, verse 1. That was the business, though they picked a quarrel with him about his wife, because an Ethiopian, as appears plainly, verse 2, hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not also spoken by us? They thought Moses went away with too much of the honor, and did repine that God should use him more than themselves. And it is observable that the lusting for flesh broke out among the mixed multitude and baser sort of the people. Numbers chapter 11, verse 4 and 5. But this of pride and envy took fire in the bosoms of the most eminent for place and piety. Oh, what need then have we, poor creatures, to watch our hearts, when we see such precious servants of God led into temptation? The spirit that dwelleth in us lusteth to envy. James 4, verse 5. Our corrupt nature is ever putting on to this sin. It is as hard to keep our hearts and this sin asunder as it is to hinder two lovers from meeting together. Thence is not more ready to be fired with every flash of lightning than the heart to be kindled by the shining forth of any excelling grace or gift in another. It was one of the first windows that corrupt nature looked out at, a sin that shed the first blood. Cain's envy hatched Abel's murder. Now if ever thou meanest to get the mastery of this sin, first call in help from heaven. No sooner hath the apostle set forth his big and teeming full the heart of man is with envy, but he shows where a fountain of grace is infinitely exceeding than that of lust. The spirit where within us lusteth to envy, but he giveth more grace. Verse 5. And therefore set not down tamely under this sin. It is not unconquerable. God can give thee more grace than thou hast sin, more humility than thou hast pride. Be but so humble as cordially to beg his grace, and thou shalt not be so proud as wickedly to envy his gifts or graces in others. Secondly, make this sin as black and ugly as thou canst possibly to thy thought, that when it is presented to thee thou mayest abhor it the more. Indeed, there needs no more than its own face. Wouldst thou look wistfully on it, to make thee out of love with it? For first, this envying of others' gifts casts great contempt upon God, and that more ways than one. First, when thou enviest the gifts of thy brethren, thou takest upon thee to teach God what he shall give, and to whom, as if the great God should take counsel or ask leave of thee before he dispenses his gifts, and darest thou stand to thy own envious thoughts with this interpretation? Such a one thou findest Christ himself give. Matthew chapter 20, verse 15. It is not lawful for me to do what I will with my own. As if Christ had said, what hath any to do to cavil at my disposal of what is not theirs but mine to give? Secondly, thou malignest the goodness of God. It troubles thee, it seems, that God hath a heart to do good to any besides thyself. Thy eye is evil, because his is good. Wouldst not thou have God be good? You had as good speak out and say, you would not have him good. He can as soon cease to be God as to be good. Thirdly, thou art an enemy to the glory of God, as thou defacest that which should set it forth. Every gift is a ray of divine excellency, and as all the beams declare the glory of the sun, so all the gifts God imparts declare the glory of God. Now envy labors to deface and sully the representations of God. It hath ever something to disparage the excellency of another withal. God showed Miriam her sin by her punishment. She went to bespatter Moses, that shone so eminently with the gifts and graces of God, and God spits in her face. Numbers chapter 12. Yea, fills her all over with a noisome scab. Dost thou cordially wish well to the honor of God, when thou hangest thou thy head, and dost not rather rejoice to see him glorified by the gifts of others? Could a heathen take it so well, when himself was passed by, and others chosen to places of honor and government that he said he was glad the city could find so many more worthy than himself. And shall a Christian repine that any are found fit to honor God besides himself? Secondly, thou wrongest thy brother, as thou sinnest against the law of love, which obliges thee to rejoice in his good as thy own, yea, to prefer him in honor before thyself. Thou canst not love and envy the same person. Envy is as contrary to love as the feverish fire in the body is to the kindly heat of nature. Charity envieth not, 1 Corinthians 13. How can it, when it lives where it loves? And when thou ceasest to love, thou beginnest to hate and kill him. And dost not thou tremble to be found a murderer at last? Thirdly, thou consultest worst of all for thyself. God is out of thy reach. What thou spittest against heaven, thou art sure to have fall on thy own face at last, and thy brother whom thou enviest, God stands bound to defend him against thy envy, because he is maligned for what he hath of God in him. Thus did God plead Joseph's cause against his envious brethren, and David against wicked Saul. Thyself only hast real hurt. First, thou deprivest thyself of what thou mightest reap from the gifts of others. That old saying is true. What thou hast is mine, and what I have thine, when envy is gone. Whereas now, like the leech, which they say draws out the worst blood, thou suckest nothing but what swells thy mind with discontent, and is after vomited out in strife and contention. Oh, what a sad thing it is that one should go from a precious sermon, a sweet prayer, and bring nothing away but a grudge against the instrument God used, as we see in the Pharisees and others at Christ's preaching. Secondly, thou robbest thyself of the joy of thy life. He that is cruel troubles his own flesh, Proverbs 11:17. The envious man doeth it to purpose. He sticks the honor and esteem of others as thorns in his own heart. He cannot think of them without pain and anguish, and he must needs pine that is ever in pain. Thirdly, thou throwest thyself into the mouth of temptation. Thou needest give the devil no greater advantage. It is a stock any sin almost will grow upon. What will not the patriarchs do to rid their hands of Joseph, whom thou envied? That very pride which made them disdain the thought of bowing to his seed made them stoop far lower, even to debase themselves as low as hell, and be the devil's instruments to sell their dear brother into slavery, which might have been worse to him, if God had not provided otherwise, than if they had slain him on the place. What an impotent and cruel mind did Saul show against David, when once envy had vomited his heart. From that day on, which he heard David preferred in the women's song above himself, he could never get that sound out of his head, but did ever devote this innocent man to death in his thoughts, who had done him no other wrong, but in being an instrument to keep the crown on his head by the hazard of his own life with Goliath. Oh, it is a bloody sin in the womb wherein a whole litter of other sins are formed. Romans 1:29, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, etc. And therefore, except you be resolved to bid the devil welcome, and his whole train, resist him in this, that comes before to take up quarters for the rest. End of chapter 9, having been read by Peter John Paresis. None of my audios are copyrighted. Please feel free to make as many copies as you desire, to the glory of God.